Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We had a brief little layoff, but I am happy to be back at it and bringing you all kinds of cool, informative, awesome guests. My guest today is no exception. I was joined on this show by Mr. Matt Beaudreau. Matt is the co-founder of the Apogee Program along with Tim Kennedy. He's an educator, a husband, a father, a patriot, an all-around good dude, and I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do as well. Let's get into it. Matt Beaudreau, welcome to the show, my friend.
Sir, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you having me. I'm excited we get to do this a couple weeks in a row, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm stoked. So for those listening, I'll be going on Matt's show. It's kind of a show slash mentorship for men, right? And that's as good a place as any to start this thing off, man. Tell me and my listeners a little bit about Apogee and everything you guys are doing, because I'm super excited to talk about that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, Tim and I. So my partner is Tim Kennedy, who a lot of listeners know, and dear friend and brother of mine. We started Apogee, as kind of this side passion project for both of us. It really just started out as this virtual mentorship program for young men while we were both building out our other businesses. I had multiple schools that I had launched. I helped him launch his school in Texas. Obviously, he's got a lot of other things going on too. So we started with this young men's program and been running that for a couple of years, where we've got these young guys that are taking on these projects and challenges and readings and workouts. And when I say young guys, like 12 to 18 ish.
Okay.
Right? So they're taking on all of these things, but we're also interacting with them daily on a private platform. And then every week, man, we're exposing them in conversation to the best men on the planet. So, we've name it, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Patrick Bet-David and Andy Frisella and Frank Grillo and Brian Callen and Nick Bare and all these just some really, really good dudes are coming in and pouring into these young guys. And so we started out as this side project. But after leaving California and I can focus on this full time, we've started to, go bigger. So we've got a men's program. We're doing the exact same thing, but with men around, being intentional on the fatherhood side and the marriage side. We got our women's program that's launching. We'll do our young ladies program. And then we are launching about 100 school campuses, K through 12, under the Apogee umbrella in the fall of 2024. So we're partnering with people all over the world to get those launched too. So it's education for the entire family, man. It's a whole lot of fun.
Dude, that's amazing. Why the name Apogee?
It's a great question, because we decided on what we wanted to do first. And then sat around a round table, myself, Tim, and a couple of other former special forces guys, and just went, all right, let's pick a name. And we started kicking around. And so to be honest, I remember it was a guy named Justin. I don't remember. He was part of Tim's crew. I don't know him any more than that meeting right there. But he was looking through and he's like, man, everything we're talking about is moving towards, like, you're moving towards a non-attainable, goal of perfection, but you're always moving towards the summit. And so we're kind of talking about hitting these mountains, and you get to the summit of the mountain. It's like, cool, go look for a bigger mountain. He's like, we're really talking about approaching the apogee of these, right, the pinnacles. So maybe that's a cool, we all just went, ooh, okay, that describes it, right? It's perfection's not attainable, but it's always the freaking goal.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a good thing you didn't have me in on that, because I'm such a nerd. When you start describing that, I'm like, oh, it's like a an asymptote, when it always it approaches the line for infinity. So asymptote would have been a pretty bad name. I'm glad you went with Apogee.
100% a better name for sure. For sure, man.
Yeah, bro. So, man, I gotta say, I've followed you on social for quite a bit, and coming into this interview, I research all my guests, and so I did a little more in-depth research on you, and I was like, whoa, this dude's done a couple TED Talks. You're all over the place. You've done a ton of interviews. I do have to say, as a bearded man, you're a handsome dude, but I definitely like the bearded look better.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to see it, man. And good on you for keeping the grays I appreciate that as someone who's heading that direction.
Yeah,
But
yours looks a whole lot better, but yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be.
yeah, yeah. So, man, tell me about sort of your philosophy on education, because that's the crux of a lot of what you've put out there and a lot of what you stand for, and the TED Talks and everything else are centered around your philosophy with education and what you're doing with Apogee and what you advocate for. I'm a father of one girl. I've got another girl coming very soon. And so I'm personally interested in this, but I know a lot of my listeners are parents. They have kids in schools, whether it's public, private, homeschooling. So I would love to just get a little bit from you. I know there's a ton out there from
Yeah.
you on this already, but just for my listeners, if you could.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, um, and to give people this, enough of the background to know that it's not just some gray bearded dude talking out his backside. Um, I my perspective comes from a couple different things. I tell people, I started figuring out the things that I'm good at very few things on this planet. I suck at almost everything, but one of the things I've always found myself to be good at is recognizing patterns. So much so that I
Mm,
clearly remember being, a 4-year-old starting kindergarten and being put in these groups and going, okay, so that group over there, they think needs the most help with this reading exercise we're about to do. That's the group that needs a little bit less. They need a little bit less, and these are the most solid readers in the class. So
mhm.
they're going to let us kind of go and do some other things. Like I started realizing that early, and I very clearly remember at 8 years old going, "I've got this school game figured out. I don't think I'll ever have to do another lick of homework. I'm going to go ahead and get straight A's for the rest of my life, and this is a pretty easy game to play."
Yeah.
And I was right. I mean, I got straight A's, not because I'm super smart, because I could recognize patterns.
You can
And
game the system.
I could game the system.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but what that got me, because people talk about that, well, what about the kids that aren't being served because they don't do well in school, and so they think they're dumb and they come out? Yes, that's a problem. Also, there are people like me who figure out how to game the system and come out, and they're just as underserved
Yes.
because now they've got this false sense of that's how life works, and it doesn't. And so I came out of school with my straight A's and went, shit, I got nothing. I don't know who I am. I'm good at sports. I'm good at girls. That's it. Right. Like, what do I do? I
Yeah.
guess I'll go to college because everybody else went to college. So I go to
Bro,
college.
this resonates so much with me, just not to cut you off, but I feel like you're describing my story too, and I
It's
think a
so
lot of
many of
people do. Yeah.
It's so many of us, right? So, come out, I go to college, it's the same thing. I get straight A's all through college. I got better at sports, I got better at girls, and I had no idea who I was and what I have to offer, right? So my senior year of college is 9/11.
Mm.
So I started going, all right, maybe there's something I can do. You know what? I know this guy who's an old kind of semi-family friend who's in the Secret Service. Maybe this is a way that I can serve my country. So I started going through the background for Secret Service my entire senior year of college. I get offered the position. All I have to do is graduate. It's March. I get offered the position. I just have to graduate, and in May I'll move out to DC or go through all the training, but I'll be out at the White House, right? I get talked out of it by that same Secret Service agent in April. So I
Mm.
graduated in May and was like, cool, I'm in the same spot, but now I got more debt. I don't know
Yep.
who I am or what I have. Like, I know nothing. Right. And so it's these odd. So I started just tackling these odd jobs, doing like whatever other college kids. I didn't move back home. There was no way in hell I was going to do that. I was going to figure it out and make it work. But I'm like, man, what is going on? So a series of smaller jobs leads me to Stanford University, where I start seeing the game from the other side.
Mm.
I game the system as a student. Now I start seeing the game from the top, where it's like, okay, college admissions isn't the meritocracy everybody thought it was. I got a bunch of really, really smart academic young people, but they are really struggling with life. Like, school is clearly not preparing them to handle anything else other than more schooling.
Mhm.
Uh, and so it was a series of steps there to go into, I'm going to go quote unquote fix things as a public school teacher. Then I was a public school administrator, a private school teacher, and a private school administrator. I give everybody that background so people understand I know school inside and out from every level you can play school.
Right.
So philosophy really stems from the fact that I would say as close to knowing as somebody can know something. Again, I'm always open to changing my beliefs if I see better evidence somewhere. but I know school and education are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
School teaches you to be good at school. Education demands you figure out who you are so that you can adapt and adjust and do well in life. Those are the differences to me, right? So when we're talking education, when we're talking about what we're doing on the schools, we are looking at the game of life and going, what are the meta skills in life that will allow you to now create your own path, to not be apathetic, to pick up the pen and write your own freaking story and be ready for the fact that shit, man, you're about to have another young hero right here, maybe coming up here in October, right, of 2023, for you to say, okay, well, when this young person is 18 and it's 2041, I know exactly what they're going to, need and when they're going to need. That's BS. You have no idea what the world looks like. All you can do is provide the best opportunity for this young person to
Right.
know who he or she is, right, and what they can do. So that's a whole big mouthful of school and education aren't the same.
Right. Right. And I love the analogy you gave in some interview I was listening to, but you talked about your son in jujitsu, and you essentially
Yep.
offered a bifurcated process, right? I can do this or I can do this. And it was essentially the classical education model of he can sit in a classroom and listen to people who have never been a champion or competed in jujitsu or done the practice of jujitsu, tell him about jujitsu for hours and hours a day,
Yep.
along with a bunch of other stuff that you described. Or I can take him to jujitsu classes where he gets on a mat, he gets his hands on another human, and he
Yep.
actually does jujitsu with someone who can do jujitsu.
Bingo. And he gets his
Yeah,
ass kicked and he learns and he fails over and over and over
absolutely.
again. Right. And it's so fascinating, Dave, because people get that intellectually. I walk people through very basic examples like that. And everybody goes, yes, of course. Of course that makes sense. Of course. Oh, but it's the emotional attachment to the way school's always been done, because we
Mm,
also have grown up now. At this point, school's been this 120, 130-year-old experiment. So we don't know anybody that's over 120 years old that tells us like, hey, by the way, human learning, the way it's always looked is just by doing. You get with people who are doing and you do it. Like it's actually, that's the factory setting.
yeah.
People are emotionally attached to doing school the way we've always done it because they're afraid. They've been taught to fear doing something different than that.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, and if you think about it, man, just in an historical context, like thinking about us as a species
yeah.
prior to our modern way of living, if
Yep.
you were the type of person that just sat around and speculated all day, you died. You had to
Right.
get out there and do things and learn by trial and error.
That's
And
right.
I man, and especially little kids. Like I have a 6-year-old daughter, man. She is this amazing ball of energy with a completely clean slate as to what the world is, and she's fascinated by everything and she can't sit still, and she's just go go go, and she inspires me daily, man. And then I think about her sitting in a classroom sort of being pushed into this mold of how they expect these young children to behave, and I know that if someone is like her and the parent is sort of disinterested and not engaged in their approach to their child's education, they'll have some administrator say that they're hyperactive, and they go down this road. Next thing you know, they're medicated, and you're suppressing that life force that makes them an amazing little human. And
Bingo.
dude, that drives me insane.
Bingo. And it's designed. So that's the issue that I have, right? My issue is not with teachers. My issue is not with good people who are administrators. Are there bad people in those roles? Of course there are.
Yeah.
Uh, but the vast majority are really, really good humans who really genuinely care about the young people. The vast majority are. My issue is not with them. My issue is the fact that we don't get told that system you just described. Again, the system, separate it from the people. It's a soulless thing. That system is designed to build obedient slaves.
Yeah.
That's what it's designed for. It's what it was created for. It wasn't, a bunch of people sitting around going, what does maximal human development look like? What are the age ranges that matter? What are the things? What are the skills? That wasn't the conversation. It was, how do we get people to do a whole lot of nothing, but where we can make the habits become obedience and apathy, over the long haul, and delay their entrance into a workforce so they don't go in and innovate and start to create, changes that we can't control. That's really what it was created for, and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And like again, speaking from my personal experience, when I look at my daughter, if I just sit her down and I'm like, okay, we're going to study math, like for the next hour, we're going to study math. And it's just this rote sort of, what is this? It's that. What is this? It's that. Dude, I
Yeah,
lose her after 3 minutes. But
yeah,
if I gamify it, if I build in some physical activity, if I make it fun and engaging for her, I've got her for the whole hour. Or like she goes to gymnastics and she's a little savage with gymnastics. She loves it. Just
yeah,
yesterday I was driving her to gymnastics and this was just a proud dad moment. I'm sure you can appreciate. She's like, "Daddy, what do you think about if I keep doing gymnastics but I also do jujitsu? Would that be okay?" And I was like, "That would be more than okay." Like
awesome.
the kids want that, dude. They want to be engaged and busy and discovering the world and being active. And uh, it's so
You
I
know
want to
why
bring
they
why?
You know why they want it? Because they're freaking human beings, and we want it too, right?
Yes.
We have this weird thing where it's like we're training young people to be humans, right? Where they're practicing to be humans. No, they're humans who just have had less practice. That's a
Yeah.
different deal. They're the same as us, man. Nobody wants to just do something because somebody else is telling them they have to do it, and there's not really a good reason, right? When you can see what it is, when you can see what it's all about, when you can see how it actually relates to something you're super pumped about or interested in or going to need, it's a whole different deal, man. Same
Yeah.
thing about it. Like nobody wants to sit down and do math, but like you said, if I gamify it for my young man, he's down. For my two daughters, if I relate anything on the math side to making money, they're down, right? Because
Right.
they're like,
Yeah.
they're like, cool, man. Especially my oldest, she's 12. She's got two jobs. She's got multiple businesses. Like that's
That's
the way
amazing.
she's running, man. So anytime I can relate money to that or numbers to the money, she's like, dude, I'm all about it. We sit down and play card games, and the card games that we played as a family that are just fun. I promise you, those are the ways. Like the quick math skills, quick addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, as much as they've done, academic work on some, dude, that's where that all of that skill developed
Yeah,
right there.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
It's relevant to their life experience.
Bingo.
Yeah. Yeah,
Bingo.
man. So parents listening right now,
Yeah.
maybe they're freaking out a little bit, right? They're like, "Oh my God, my 8-year-old is in public school. What should I do?" So what would you recommend to parents with young children, especially when they have the option of public school, private school, homeschool, or whatever educational strategy they employ for their child, especially in the context of our modern educational landscape where they're also in many instances being sort of force fed an ideology that a lot of parents disagree
Right.
with. And I'll leave it that fairly
Yeah.
general, but you know what I'm talking about.
100%. And that's, by the way, that's not accidental either. And that's not going to go away with people's protests at the board meetings. It's just not. It's been a plan for a long time. And I know that sounds super conspiratorial, but it's been fun. The small immature child in me, I guess, has taken some pride in some old teachers that I worked with, and that have come to me now and gone, hey, you told me these agendas were going to play out and that we were going to have to push this 15 years ago, and I told you were crazy. Sorry about that. It's like, man, it's all good. I don't
Yeah.
need an apology. Just I know the game. Like this isn't going away.
Yeah.
So parents understanding that you're not weird for being afraid to take your kids out of a public school or a conveyor belt school model. That's a normal thing. You've been trained. One of my favorite quotes is by Jodorowsky, and he says, birds born in a cage think flying is an illness.
Mm,
Right? And so you were born into this cage of schooling. You were born into a cult. So it's not abnormal to be like, ooh, I want to leave the cult, but also I feel like I still need to do cult stuff. Right? That's
yeah.
not an abnormal thing. You're normal for having those fears, but we got to at least address the fears and start taking a look at what's possible versus what's normal, right? Um, what's familiar isn't necessarily what's true. And just
Right.
because school is familiar, that doesn't mean it's the truth. So you're okay, but let's start wrestling with it a little bit. So one of the things for parents, I want them to realize there are options. Um, I think because I get in my own bubble of people that I get to talk to and the people that I, in the circles that we run in, and I forget how much personal responsibility so many people in my circle take. And a lot of people outside of that, it's not because they don't want to take personal responsibility, it's because they were trained they didn't have to on certain things. So understanding that you do have options, understanding that you can home educate, and it doesn't have to look like school. In fact, it shouldn't look like school. Understanding there are great options that are, we're labeled alternative. When you and I grew up, alternative school meant, oh, these guys are about to go to juvenile hall, and this is like
Right.
their life.
The bad kids.
Yeah, it's the bad
Yeah.
kids, right? And now it's come to mean something else, but really the alternative it's the alternative to the conveyor belt. A lot of these programs are simply going back to what we've been talking about, the way humans have always been designed to learn. You fail, just like learning to walk. You get up, you wobble, you suck at it, you fall on your ass, you failed at walking. People around you that care about you cheer you on. You get up, you try again until eventually you're walking and running and skipping. That's how it works for everything.
Yeah.
Right. So these alternative programs are going back to that. So there are alternatives in your area, likely alternatives in your neighborhood. And if there aren't, there are organizations like Acton Academies, like Apogee Schools that are allowing you to partner with them to bring these things to your neighborhood. Right. So there are options, man. You just got to dive in and go, okay, what makes the most sense? And it's not just about diving into the options that are available. It's about diving into your family. It's about diving into your young kids. It's about diving into that family dynamic and going, how do we want as a family to lead our children better? That's what part of freedom and sovereignty is all about. You
Yeah.
decide. You decide. Who are my kids? What are our family values? And what are we going to do to make sure we're aligned with that? Because if we're saying our values are A, B, and C, and school's values are clearly X, Y, and Z, and we're saying, you should change. Don't do this to my kids. Do you have your lunch? You got your backpack? Here you go. And we're shipping
Mm-hmm.
them off, or we're saying we don't agree. There's a level of hypocrisy there, right? That you can't avoid. So figuring out who you are as a family and what options align, man, is step one.
Yeah. Yeah. And, some parents, I think a lot of people in general in this country have been groomed to view, what's the best way to put it? Government as authority, right? And they apply that sort of same paradigm to school, right? The school knows better than I do. And I think a lot of people don't have that level of like, no, 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 no. I pay these people's paychecks. I pay for these public servants with my tax dollars. This is something that was created for me by those who came before me, right? To better society. And it's fully incumbent upon me to say, this isn't working, right? You aren't the ones who know best, because this is how we choose, like you said, as a family to move
Mhm.
through this world. And this is what we stand for. So I think some of that is fear, lack
Yeah.
of confidence in themselves, and also
Yes.
this sort of deferment to authority, to perceived authority, I should say, because they're
Right.
not really authority. And it all comes together to sort of people, I think, Matt, would agree with you in conversation on every point, just like you said, and then still go right back to the conveyor belt because of those things.
Because of those things, because of that fear. And what's interesting is the conveyor belt system is designed specifically to keep you in that fear, so much so that you don't want it. It's a Stockholm syndrome, right? Like you fear what you're involved in, but you are, have an affinity now that's developed for your captors where you think you can't survive without them.
Right, right.
And
Because they think, oh, they won't be able to get into college. They won't have a good life. When, I think the average person that went that route, if you sat down and asked them,
yeah,
candidly, they would say, man, I didn't learn anything worthwhile in college. Now I'm in this job that I hate. I'm commuting every day. I work 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever. I'm out of shape. I hate my life, etc. And you
Still,
gave you gave one of your favorite quotes earlier, and I think it was great. And I think it ties in perfectly to a Thoreau quote, which says, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation." Whenever I hear that, I picture that exact scenario. You went to school in public schools, you went to college, you got the degree because that's what you were told you were supposed to do. And then you got a job in corporate America, and now you're 45, you're overweight, you don't feel on top of your game, you eat like crap, you drink beer when you get off work, and like rinse repeat, but you're going to say this is what my kids should do as well, when deep inside that's not what they should be doing.
that's exactly right, man. I use this. We did an event at one of my campuses. I guess it might have been a couple of years ago, but some guys, myself and Bedros and John Lovell and Ray Care,
Great
Ryan,
guys.
a good bunch of good dudes, man. Ryan Mickler, Stephen Mansfield, Jack Donovan, Tanner Guzzi, just a bunch of good dudes. We had actually gone down to Mexico together and brought our families down, went down there for a week to kind of collaborate and put this stuff together. And we had this big event at one of my campuses, and we all spoke and we sat down and had the kind of this round table sort of deal. And one of the conversations that came up was how elephants get trained. And we started talking about, right, taking these elephants, and you take them when they're young and you tie them up to these posts, and they physically can't pull away from these posts. They want to inherently. Their DNA is like, get the hell out of here, like bail, go. And they can't. They physically can't. So then they just finally mentally acquiesce and go, all right, man, I guess that's what it is. I guess this post has me beat. There's nothing I can do. And the sad part is you can take that elephant when that elephant gets full grown and is this massive, beautiful, powerful, crazy freaking beast. And you can take that same little tiny rope, put it around the leg into the post, and immediately they'll just go, shit, here it is. Right? And when all they've got to do is understand that that's no longer something that holds them, and they've got to pull, but they've been so broken by it. Right. And so that's essentially what you're talking about. We do that very early. We pull the kids out. We really train them into that. We put them in that mindset so that even as they're older, even as they see, this isn't working for me, they go, but this is the way it is. And they'll go grab their own kids and be like, hey, come here. Let me tie you up, man. I'm going to tie you up.
Yeah. And you could even take that analogy exactly like what you're saying. And now that the parent is conditioned, the parent elephant, you don't even have to tie that little kid elephant to a strong post, because the parent will say, you could tie, exactly. You tie him to a plastic chair and the parent will say, it's impossible to move that thing. Stay right there.
That's right.
And so it becomes generational. And
that's
where powerful.
And that's where we are, man. And so, what we end up seeing, whether it's through schools, whether it's through the mentorship programs, whatever they're working with, it's interesting, man, because I say people have we have kind of this factory setting, right? And this factory setting is actually, for the majority of people, I really believe it's a brilliance. It's the factory setting is a desire to grow. It's a curiosity. It's natural bravery. It is like the things that we hold as kind of these, quote unquote, heroic ideals. I really think those are the factory settings for us, man.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things we're talking about a lot is, like, as we're working with these young heroes, it is, how do we maintain those factory settings? And as we're working with their parents and working with the adults, it's more about addition by subtraction. It's like, how do we strip away the lies, the garbage, the stories you're telling yourself about the stories, like all the BS that you've loaded onto the initial factory settings, right? How do we get you back to factory settings, and how do we maintain the factory settings for these young heroes? That's really the game that we're playing, man.
Yeah, it has to be the factory setting, man, because you think about just the fact that we're all the product of survivors, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of generations, thousands of generations. And people should really think about this, right? Your parents and your parents' parents and your parents' parents' parents and so on and so forth, they were the strong ones who made it long enough in life to reproduce, right? Just de facto. That's how it is. You are the result of many generations of survivors. And
Yeah.
it's those factory settings that made those people survive when they were in a pre-modern world. And so I agree with you, man. It's 100% how we're programmed. It's like you just held up your phone when you're talking about factory settings, and I was thinking about how Apple used to always put that stupid U2 album on all their new phones, and it's like
Right. I
that's
remember
what's
that.
happening, man. They're forcing U2 on us,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, bro, I don't want to listen to that music. You know,
Yeah.
I want to do my own thing.
So good, man. Yeah, you're the descendants of winners. I mean, that's it, right? And I've had some push because people look for reasons. This shakes people a lot. This conversation shakes people a lot, and I get it, man, because then people start feeling like, and again, I'm never attacking the parents. If you're sending your kids to, this conveyor belt school, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, think through it, and that's it. You're gonna do what you're gonna do, and that's what freedom and sovereignty are all about. But at least give it some thought. And people get pretty upset with me, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're looking down on me because I'm sending." Nah, man, that's not it. I want you to think through everything you're doing and think through the different fears that you have. I had a mom we had a young man who stepped off the stage, graduated from one of our schools, and walked into it was like $75,000 a year gig with a bunch of other college grads reporting to him, with a great organization in a field that he wanted to work in, right? And this entire nationwide organization changed their policy. They almost never, it's funny, it's owned by a UC Berkeley grad. I know that for a fact. But they had never hired anybody outside of a college graduate. They changed their entire nationwide company policy, 1,000 employees, to hire this young man because he was the type of young man they wanted. So he's 18 years old. They shifted it. He can work, and he's got college grads, answering to him. 75 grand at 18 to go do this in a field that he wants to go work in because he's done an internship already there. So he already knows what's going on, man. And so it was super freaking rad. And I had the mom going, I mean, this is cool, but I hope he quits. I hope he goes to college. And I said, okay, why do you hope he goes to college? Like, what is it about? So that he has a degree to fall back on so that he can get a good job. What do you like? What is it that he's got now? Like,
Yeah.
it's man.
Not to belittle baristas, but I know a lot of baristas who have college degrees that that's where they fell back, right? And so
100%.
I think that if you had to compare this current sort of climate in regards to this stuff to a decade ago, even, things
Yeah.
do seem to be heading in the right direction in terms of the way the populace is thinking. And I think a lot of that is due to the decentralization of media. Right
Yep.
now, we have all these independent creators and social media and all this stuff. And people are waking up to the fact that they don't have to go to college and grad school and put a bunch of letters behind their name to get a job to raise a family. And I got a question recently on Instagram on my stories. You can do that question thing, and someone
Yeah.
asked me, because I went the traditional route. I'm 36, so I was, graduating high school in '05, and back then, this stuff was really just sort of, that's what you do, and that's the measure of success. So I was asked, if you had to get different degrees than what you have now, what would you get? And I said, nothing, man. I would have started a business or gone to work right out of school. I wouldn't have gone to college. And look, I think for some people, yeah, if you want to be a surgeon, a medical doctor, something like that, you've got to
Sure.
go to professional school. But for so many people, man, it just makes no sense. You end up burdened with debt that you took on, by the way, when you didn't even have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, and you
Yep.
didn't understand the ramifications of that debt. And now you can't find a good job because the market is saturated with people who have bachelor's degrees, and
Totally.
you got a ton of debt, and you've been indoctrinated to play a victim and blame that entire scenario on the system. And yeah, sure, but you've got to take some responsibility as an individual and say, I'm not going to fall into that path, right? So
100%.
That's how I answered it, man. I would not go back and do it the way I did it.
Well, nor would I. I'm with you. I mean, I have graduate degrees, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it the same way either, even when I was coming out of high school, never mind today. It is less relevant today than it was,
Yeah.
when we were graduating. Right. And again, like, I get that, what you said about the doctors and all that, because people ask me that all the time. Like, what if your kid wants to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer? And the first thing I say is, do they? Because the majority of the people that say that, the honest answer there is, well, no, they don't. It's like, cool, man. So then you're not arguing for your kid. You're arguing for the sake of your own, emotional attachment to the way things, quote unquote, should be done. But yeah, sure. And even that, it's like, man, it's kind of a bummer that somebody goes in and truly knows they want to be a surgeon. They're still going to have to take, semesters worth of, whatever, women's liberal study, this, whatever. Like, they're still gonna have to take a bunch of superfluous garbage and pay a lot of money for it. So that in of itself is still kind of a bummer, when if they were super interested about it, they could probably get the same information for free through the library and YouTube. But that said, yeah, so there's still some things that it makes sense for, but for the vast majority, man, there's, and I don't get invited to speak at universities anymore.
I'm so shocked.
Yeah, so super shocking, huh? Because part of what I ask the professors is, why do they need to go to your course? Why do they need to go to your class? What is it that they're going to get from you that's uniquely? And if you can answer this, well, great, then there's a value prop, right? But what are they going to get uniquely from you that they can't get for free through the library or in some other course, Coursera or YouTube or Masterclass, or at a really discounted rate? Like, what are you bringing to the table that they got to pay this premium on? And the vast majority of the time that it was, well, they're not going to get a degree without it. And man, I just don't think that's a really good reason.
Yeah,
I
man.
Really don't.
And we were talking before we started recording. I did my undergrad at NCSU, North Carolina State, and I went to UC Berkeley for a PhD in biochemistry. And through all that schooling, man, when I left my grad program, I didn't know how to do my taxes. I didn't know personal finances. I didn't know how to run a household. I didn't know anything about real life, dude. And it's just like mind blowing, because I got out. I had some student debt. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot because I got scholarships and stuff. But you enter the world, and I told you, after grad school, I was overeducated and unemployed. But on top of that, I didn't even know how to manage my own personal finances, man. And I just think it's insane that required coursework, if you're going to require any coursework in high school or whatever, isn't, hey, here's how here's how a checking account works. Here's how taxes work. Here's how credit cards work. All these things every human needs to know to exist in this society. They don't teach that
at all. And so parents can, take some solace in this too. Like, instead of focusing on getting mad at your kid for, homework, you got to get your homework done. No, how about teach them how to work at home? So right, that's a different sort of deal. So why don't you have, like, I always tell parents to walk through this exercise. I want you to pretend, depending on how, and obviously this is dependent upon the age of your young person as well. Clearly there is a dependency on this, but you understand what I'm saying with this exercise is go, okay, man, my wife and I, let's say we go on a trip and, we get snowed in somewhere. We can't get home, and we're not going to get home for a day. Are my kids okay? Like, are they okay? Can they do what's needed to be done around the house? Can they, now we live on a farm, there's even more responsibilities. Can they make sure all the animals are taken care of? Can they make sure the fencing is solid? Can they make sure all the things that we have to check every single day? Are they able to do that? If Heather and I can't make it home, are they able to make dinner? Are they disciplined enough as far as human beings to where they're going to make good food choices? They're going to go to bed and get a decent night's sleep. Can they do that? Hey, what if we got snowed in for a week? Are they good? What if we got snowed in for a month and there's actually bills that had to be paid too? Do they understand what that means? Do they understand do they know how to get on the computer, log in, and make sure bills are taken care of and make sure that's all set? Right? Like, I take us through those kinds of thought exercises. And if you find a part where you're like, well, yeah, but they wouldn't be able to do laundry because cool, man. Now you know what you need to show your child how to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Like you're getting an idea of the things that you can help equip them with so that by the time they're done, like it was a weird thing growing up going like, you don't talk about money. You don't talk. I could generally figure out how much money my parents made based on the jobs they had. But man, we never talked about it. We never talked about it. Dude, we talk about it all the time in this house. And we don't operate in a normal we don't even operate in the 1040 tax system. We operate in a 1041 tax system. It's a whole different ballgame. And I'm teaching my kids what that looks like. I'm teaching them how the business pours into a business trust that pours into a family trust that pours into a foundation I'm showing them that entire thing so that becomes their baseline for normal.
Yeah.
And that's a parent's role. You're the primary educator, and that's what you need to be educating them on more than anything else. How do you win at the game of life? First and foremost, that's where the focus needs to be. And it's, and again, academia a lot of times is at war with it. They want a different game. I've told this story a couple times on a couple different shows, but it blows my mind. And it's nothing against this gentleman. I don't even remember his name. But I remember, what was that? Clubhouse, that app that was out for a while.
Yeah.
So it was a Clubhouse conversation that I got invited into. And so it's kind of like a real time, sort of almost like a multi-person podcast. It was myself. It was another guy who was a keynote speaker. It was the CEO of Coors, the beer. At point, I don't remember his name. David Green, who was the CEO of Hobby Lobby, and then a Yale MBA professor. And so we started talking, we were going down the rabbit hole of hiring, and we started talking about education and what things could look like, should look like versus what they do, and the problems that Coors was having, hiring good people, and Hobby Lobby, same sort of thing. And so I started talking about the schools I was building and all these things. The Yale MBA professor at some point was like, these schools that you're talking about, like, first of all, from a business standpoint, like this won't, like your model is not going to work. Like the model is not sustainable. Like, okay. Then he's like, and the things you're talking about with your kids, it's not realistic. And they're not going to, it's not going to turn out well. Like they're not going to understand what you think they're going to understand because you need to send them to school first on stuff. So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to walk through this really quickly. But before we do, how many businesses have you owned and operated? 0.
Yeah.
He's a Yale MBA professor, owned and operated 0 businesses, right? I said, okay, cool. That's fine. My current businesses that you say aren't going to work are each generating at least 7 figures in revenue. So let's just go ahead and put that out there right now. And then you're talking about my children and parenting. How many children do you have? 0. Like, okay. So
wow.
my kids, my daughters at this time were like 9 and 7, and they just bought their own horses based on the businesses they had created at the schools we were running. And they're all 3 of my kids are the most wildly like competent, mature, kind, purpose-driven people I know. So, that's a big problem with on the academic side of talking theory versus actual application to what it looks like in the real world. So again, real world stuff matters.
Yeah. That's a great example. And I have people all the time because I eventually I did learn how to manage finances and start a business and everything, and built and sold a business. And I have people all the time, young people especially, or maybe I guess they're still young people. They're in college or finishing up college. They're like, I want to be in business. I'm thinking about going to get my MBA. I'm like, stop. You don't need, dude, you don't need an MBA to open a business. And that is, if anybody listening is in that place and they think that somehow getting an MBA is going to make you a better entrepreneur, stop right now, because it's the biggest racket. It's exactly what Matt described. It's people who haven't done it pontificating on how you should do it based off of theory and things that haven't been proven in the real marketplace.
I remember seeing a stat not too long ago. And I believe it was segmented to talk about a specific group of schools, but it was talking about the quote unquote elite schools, which is a myth in and of itself, right? But you talking your Ivy League, it was like an Ivy League stat. So you got your Ivy League schools, and they were including some of the other West Coast schools. They were including Berkeley, they were including Stanford, they were including UCLA, they were including some of these kind of things in this, so again, the elite quote unquote, which is garbage.
Garbage.
It was garbage. And they were talking about MBAs that have come out of those programs, and they were saying 5 years later, the number of MBAs that had graduated from those elite, programs and were owning and operating a profitable business. 5 years later, all of the MBAs, all the elite schools, the percentage of those grads that own and operated a profitable business. You got any guess what the percentage was?
5, 3.
Yeah, 4. Yep.
Yeah. Man, I bookended it. Sweet.
You bookended it. It was perfect. Yeah, totally. 4%.
Wow. I'm not shocked, man. I'm truly not shocked. I was in recruiting for almost a decade. So after grad school, I had all this scientific training and I didn't want to be locked away in a lab. And I was looking for some way to leverage that to get into the business world. I found scientific recruiting and I did that until I started my own company. And bro, I can't tell you, and this was 2010 to 2020-ish range. And the number of MBA candidates that I had, or MBA recipients rather, that I had applying for entry-level jobs that didn't require an MBA, that just required a bachelor's degree or not even that, was staggering. It was staggering. And they thought it made them a better candidate, but here's what I would hear back from the clients. We don't want someone with an MBA. They're overqualified. And I was doing a lot of recruiting for Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, big, these guys. And and I was doing engineers and scientists and stuff. And so they found themselves not being able to get entry-level positions, not really being set up to start their own business. And it was just a totally worthless degree, not only worthless, but something that painted them into this corner where they really had no recourse, right? Unless somebody was willing to hire someone they deemed overqualified. But for the most part, those people just got rejected and just this vicious cycle, man, of being overqualified for the jobs they wanted and underqualified for anything else.
So I hope parents hear this, man, and understand the opportunity. So you just named a couple of my clients right there too. So as I was building out all these schools, the first schools that I was building out in California, I was building these out, but I was also on the road. Anytime I wasn't home building these out, I was on the road providing for my family. I was building 2 businesses at once. I was building all the schools so my kids could go there and could open them up to the community. And we built multiple throughout California, right? So was doing that, but I was also providing for my family by being a keynote speaker and consultant to all the biggest organizations in the world. You just named a couple of my clients right there. Lockheed was a client for a long time, and other huge, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, like name it. What I got to work with all these organizations. The reason they were bringing me in is because in a general sense, they were hiring all these people that had all these degrees and the people sucked. And they're like, how do we bridge the gap so we don't fire all of these people? How do we make them better? Because school clearly was not the answer, right? That was essentially what we're getting brought in for.
Right.
And so what I learned here too, and I hope parents hear this as encouraging, man, because what I learned from a lot of these organizations is even as they were putting in the filtering mechanism of degree required, a lot of times, man, they're just like, dude, if I know who somebody is and I've got great network and great references that they can come circumvent, I don't want to sit and sift through 200 resumes. If I know somebody and they've got a skill set and they can do the job and they're going to do it well and their values align with our organizational values, and I'm not going to bring them in and they're not going to be an HR nightmare, and I can see somehow they've got the skill set, like shit, degree required is a great filtering mechanism, but dude, no, we just need the skills.
Yep.
Like here you go. Right. So we've used that knowledge to help a lot of our young students go directly into these degree required positions because they match on all the other things. Right. And they can show that. and they can create the network around that. And they get in an internship and maybe go apprentice for a little while when they're young and they don't have responsibilities, and they can work their way into these kind of things, right? That should be encouraging, because what happens, parents, is those parents have prepared the child for the road versus trying to prepare the road for the child. And so now they're able to adapt, right? Now they're able to go ahead and provide value immediately, and it opens up opportunities. And here is the paradox or the irony or whatever you want. When you have a young person who has that kind of capability, and no matter where they came from, a homeschool environment or an quote unquote alternative school or whatever, here's the irony. It actually makes it even easier for them to get into college should they decide they want to go to college.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have to, and it's actually easier to do it if they decided they wanted to.
Wow.
Like, it's, prepare the young person.
Yeah, man, that's a great point too, along the lines of, these executives or business owners saying, if I have a personal connection to someone, I'd rather that than going through hundreds of resumes. When I started my company, I hired my initial team. We had about 30 people when we started the first wave of hiring. When I sold it, we had about 100 employees, and just about every single one of those was a referral from one of those original employees.
Yep.
It's just, that's the way it works, man. And if you say, hey, if you're someone who's done the job and proven yourself, and you say, hey, my friend Bob, I really think he'd be great, I'm going to listen to you, right? Like that's so true, man. And that's what business owners, that's what they want, right? So
100%, man, 100%. As we're building out, Apogee is, as we're launching these campuses, as we're building out the foundations, the private foundation, as well as the public charity, the 501c3 around it. There's a lot more public facing things Tim and I are going to need to do, especially in 2024. And there is going to be a point where we need to build out some organizational structure around it a little bit. I can tell you right now, we are already pulling from our own circles of the people that we are coaching right now. Like the men that we're coaching right now are a lot of the guys that are launching schools that are Apogee schools. There are a lot of the guys that are going to go forward and help do affiliate coaching on our side for the men. There are a lot of the guys that are going to be mentoring the young men. There are a lot, like, we're building out from inside these guys that we know. And then what happens is I'll throw Lovell under the bus right now, but like Lovell,
Warrior Poet.
The Warrior Poet, man, he got a hold of me
Love
not too long ago and was like, he's a great dude, man. And he's like, hey man, I just tried to hire for this new position. It was a guy that I thought, would be solid. He's had military background and all this. He's a chump. I had to get rid of him. You got any good young guys in your circle? Right? Like, that's how it actually works. Got any good young guys in your circle? Here's the job. Here's what's going on. Yep. Right. And it's nonstop conversations like that, because again, it's like, it's a trusted source saying, yeah, this guy, by the way, matches with our morals, our character, our value set, whatever that looks like. We agree on that. So he's going to come in. We got that work ethic is the same. That warrior ethos is the same. Yes. Here you go. And oh, by the way, he's got the drive. You'll teach him all the stuff that he needs to know too on the job anyways, but he's going to show up and be interested and show out,
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I'm really passionate about these days and that I've been doing a lot of is now I help with companies with recruiting still, because it's something I did forever. And I love it. I love talking to people, interviewing people. I just love people. And I'm passionate about working with companies who believe in meritocracy instead of this woke DEI, ESG, CRT, you name the acronym, right? They truly just want to hire good, hardworking people. Because short aside, I was talking when I still owned my company before we sold, I was talking to someone, and it just so happened that all of my leadership, except for one gentleman, happened to be female, and a lot of them were females, quote unquote, of color, right? And I was talking to somebody about business, and they were like, good for you for making diversity a priority in your hiring. And I was like, hold on a second right there. I didn't. I made merit a priority in my hiring, and the best people for those jobs happened to be females, and some of them were females of color. I didn't do what Joe Biden did and say, I don't know who I'm hiring, but it's going to be a black female. Right.
So strain
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna find the best person, whether they're black, white, whatever, that doesn't matter. Who's best for the job, that's who I'm hiring. And so I'm really passionate about that, man. And I'm working with a lot of like construction sales team types,
Mm,
and so construction companies who want to hire out their sales team. I'm working with a couple roofing companies and several other uh, construction type fields. And when I have a new opening, where do I go? Do I go to Indeed, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, whatever? No. So here's what I do. I volunteer at the church every other Sunday on the security team, and I'll ask all those gentlemen, "Hey, who do you know?" I'm
mhm,
involved with Moms for Liberty and the local Republican Party here. I ask them, "Hey, who do you know?" I'm
mhm.
involved in just several other organizations that have shared values, who are good people, hardworking people. And that's always the best places where I find the best people for these jobs. Or if that doesn't work, I'll use my social media, because the people who follow me
Mm,
generally have shared values, and they're the type of people who believe what I believe. And that's
bingo,
where we have found pretty much all the best people for these teams, for these companies.
bingo. It's the way the real world works, right?
A
Like
hundred
that's
percent.
it's people operate in the way we've been told that it works versus paying attention to how things actually work. Those
Yeah.
are not the same games. Again,
Yeah.
my biggest beef with school is it's a completely different game. Nobody ever said, "Hey, you want to get really good at football? Spend 18 years playing baseball." Because,
Yep.
man, they're both games, right? And there's balls associated. No, they're completely different games. When I
Yeah.
get done with 18 years of baseball, like I'm going to be good at baseball. And then now all of a sudden you're going to ask me to be good at football. It's not the same game, right? School life, not
Right.
the same.
It's really, it breaks down to an is versus ought paradigm,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
life is what is, and
yep,
then school oftentimes is what ought,
yeah,
theoretically, the way they
yep.
think it should be, or you know, and so you need to operate based on what is, not what ought, right?
Bingo, bingo.
Y-
That's exactly
Yeah.
it, man. So, no, good on you.
So I want to be respectful of your time, but I did want to just really quick. Yesterday we had the second round of Republican debates, and I don't know
Mhm,
if you watched any of that, but it was excuse the explicative, it was a shit show. And
mhm,
a lot of the guys are starting to say the same thing that Vivek Ramaswamy has said since the beginning: abolish the Department of Education, the
mhm.
federal Department of Education. I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about the federal Department of Education, and do you think that it should be abolished?
So funny, man. That's a great. I like the question. I remember when I was on Tulsi's show, she said, "Okay, so you're now you're now put in as the head of the Department of Education.
Fire
Like,
myself and
yeah,
get
what
rid
do
of
you
it.
do?" And I'm like, "Yep, the whole thing's done. Whole thing's gone." She's
Yeah.
like, "But how do we use that for good? How do we save it? How do we?" And I can't get on board with it being a thing in general. Lord Acton was famous for saying, "Power corrupts. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely." Right. And so
Hmm.
what we've done is made this giant complex organization around education. And I think that's the most ironic place to build complexity, because what happens is if you have a super complex system, you inherently beget simplicity of thought for the human. So, you have your tax codes and your tax system, like that's a complex system, and you get the majority, or it's going to operate in this simplistic mindset of like, man, that's just too overcomplicated. I've got to simplify anything I can understand. If you really want the human mind to flourish and really develop all of the complexity that is inherent, that we are designed to operate within, and all the bigger thoughts and the pattern recognition and all the things that we say are actually skills, right? Critical thinking, which means thinking about your thinking. It's not just
How to think, not what to think.
actually how to think, and
Yeah.
observing thoughts and wrestling with your own thoughts and going, why do I think this? And why
Mm.
does this person think this? And what are like, if we want people to engage with those things, then the system around it has to actually be relatively simple, right? It's that paradox of create the system that's simple. So Department of Education to me is an inherently complex system to make sure people never actually get educated. So I think it needs to go. I don't think it ever will at all. But I think it needs to I think it needs to not be a thing. I think, conveyor belt school. I'm much more of like, let's go free market style. Let's work on home education. Again, I'm not smart enough to know, hey, systemically as a nation, here's how we fix it. I also am not naive enough to think it'll ever go away.
Right. Right. That's fair. That's fair. But I agree with your general sentiment that it's an inherently complex system designed
Mm,
to make sure nobody ever truly gets educated, which is
100%.
ridiculous because they spend $80 billion of our tax dollars on that every year, which is
Mm,
just insane, brother.
it is insane. And again, like I want good people in the system only because there are young people who, we're in this cultural state, man, where we've got a lot of bad humans who are raising children, right? And when I say bad
Mm.
humans, some of them are evil, some of them are just not good at raising young humans, some of them are disinterested, some of them are apathetic, some of them are absent. We got all these
Some of
absent
them are
fathers.
useful idiots.
Some of them are useful freaking idiots. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely right. So Saul Alinsky on that one. So
Hmm.
yeah, so uh, we've got a number of those people. So sometimes for these young people, whoever they are seeing at our government schools, those are the best human beings they're ever going to see. And I want good people there.
Mm.
I really, I do. I root for those people. But I think the thing that we need to do right now is do what a lot of people who are able to, who are taking on personal responsibility of pulling their kids out, whether it's home educating. We're over 5 million home educated children in this country now, first time
I saw
since.
that. That's
That's
insane,
huge.
man.
So, we need more of that. We need more schools like Apogee schools, like Acton Academies, like various, Montessori's and Waldorfs and Prendas. And I mean, there's a lot of great organizations that are doing a really good job. We need more and more and more of that so that people just go, okay, there are options. And at the very least, my hope is that kind of like what CrossFit did in the fitness industry, where you like CrossFit or you don't, I don't care. But you can't argue that everybody knows what it is, and it forced some of the conventional like big box Gold's gyms and 24 hours and Bally's. They started doing CrossFit style classes now, right? Because
Yep.
it was like, that's a movement we just can't deny. So I want to do the same thing on the education side. So at the
Yeah.
very least, we can put that pressure to be like, hey, it could look different. And there's a lot of people proving that. That's kind of the road we're taking.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. And with CrossFit, I've always said, say what you want about it, think what you want to think about Greg Glassman. I love the guy
Yeah.
personally, but you can't deny that CrossFit, A, got a lot of asses off of couches, and B, got a lot of barbells in people's hands. And that, yeah, that is undeniable and a very good thing. So, last thing I just want to touch on real quick. We just hit over an hour. So, like I said, I want to be respectful, although I could talk to you probably for 4 hours about this stuff,
It
man.
would be easy.
Um, the state of masculinity and
Mhm.
being a man in the modern era, I would say the most common person I hear from today on all the different platforms is either a young man who feels lost, right? I'm
Mhm.
talking 16, 17. What do I do with my life? They're telling me that by embracing the very core of who I am, I'm being toxically masculine, right? I'm competitive. I want to win. I want to run the score up on life, and they're saying that that's bad. Or close to middle-aged man who's married and miserable and like, bro, how do I turn it around? How do I get on the top of things? How do I kick the rest of life's ass?
Mhm.
These are who I hear from all the time, and I think a lot of it is a byproduct of how men are viewed and portrayed in the media and
Yep.
in society writ large. What do you
Yep.
say to men today? I know that's a big part of your heart and what you do, but if you could give any advice to these young men and older men who are trying to navigate this landscape, what would you say?
Man, it's such a good question. It is. It's a big question. And you're right. There's the portrayals, that are either men are inherently toxic, right? And they're these, you know, they're just out for themselves. They're out to just make money at everybody else's expense. They're out to just, what, like you get that, or you got the goofy, nerdy dad bod who just lets
Hmm.
everybody else, right? You got both of these extremes when the reality is we're not wired for either of those things, right? We're wired to absolutely do well, but we're wired to do well so we can take care of and serve and love those,
Yes.
that we're charged with, right? And so I think definition of terms is one thing people need to start with. Socrates says the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms, right? So when we take a look at defining what masculinity is, to me, it is this classic, almost classic set of values, right? It's a classic set. It's the Bushido code of loyalty and honor and commitment and compassion and politeness. And it's like this, right? So it's the gentleman on one side and it's the savage on the other, right? And it's the ability to operate in both.
I need that shirt.
It's how we talk about it. Like, it's the ability to operate on both sides. And I think the more we can expand our spectrum of, I can really lean into this gentleman side, I can really lean into the savage side if I had to, even though the majority of the time I'll never have to. It's having both of those. The bigger we can make that spectrum, the more impact I think we get to make other people. So it starts with defining those terms and then defining what that looks like for you. So I'm going to, practicality wise, again, this is a huge conversation because there's the aspect of external and internal that are inherent in this conversation. The external deals with, I can't control what people are saying about this. I can't control what people are going to say necessarily about me to some extent. I can't control, the public view. I can't control, but you still have to understand how to take it into consideration enough to not care, right? Not listen to it. We work with our guys and our young guys, and we're like, hey, you're going to have some people in your life that are like, you suck, you're garbage, you're toxic. It's not true. You're also going to have people that are in your life that are like, you're the best thing since sliced bread. Also not true.
Also not true. Yeah.
Also not true, right? So it inevitably comes down to the internal game of getting to the peace of mind that really starts and ends in between your ears. So what we have our young men and our men do is we really make that whole thing a personal game as quickly as humanly possible. We work with Todd Herman, who is the author of The Alter Ego Effect. He was Kobe Bryant's kind of like mindset coach, got the whole Black Mamba mentality, right? Came out from his work with Todd. So we work with Todd to develop these alter egos. And it goes back further than Todd. It's like Plato's, Plato's forms, right? They were his ideals. So the whole concept is building out, what is your ideal version of you? Forget the external influences as much as possible. What's the ideal version of you in all the areas that you have to show up and play in life? You are a husband? Great. We're going to take that and isolate that. What does the ideal version of you as a husband look like? How does he look? How does he act? How does he show up? How does he speak? How does he think? We want to dive into that. And it's partially based on who you want to be. And it's partially based on the other side. Who does your wife need you to be?
Right.
Like, let's list all of that out. And then we're going to take Napoleon Hill's concept of, like, from Think and Grow Rich, that board of directors, right? And we're going to go, okay, in your board of directors, then for the husband, who are guys? You just named all these characteristics of the ideal version of you as a husband. Who are men that you can look to that you think at least have one or two of those ideals? Let's put them as your board of directors. Now let's work on the psychology of how do we get you into that mindset as quickly as possible, right? So we actually go through all of that with the guys. And then we go, cool, and you're a dad. That's a separate guy, right? Like, That's a separate dude. It's the same guy, but it's a different guy. And everybody knows that's true. You don't talk to your 6-year-old daughter the exact same way you talk to your wife. Those are different relationships.
Definitely
You're
not.
Still authentically Dave.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't make you inauthentic. You're just going to speak differently. Just like the relation, and then you and I are going to get together and we speak differently to each other. You're still Dave very much, but you're going to talk to another man much differently than you talk to your wife, or that you talk to your 6-year-old little girl. Like, it's just different. So we take each one of those and go, cool. Now, as the dad, same exercise. And who are the guys that you look to, right? As a friend, as an entrepreneur, as the guy that shows up at the gym. Like, we're literally going to break down all those things and make it this internal game to figure out your ideal version first. And then we'll worry about the external at that point, because we've got a framework and a peace of mind around this, knowing that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how quote unquote perfect you are. Somebody's going to not like it. Somebody's not going to like it. So it is what it is.
Yep.
But you got it's the internal game first.
Yeah. Wow, that's so well put and so true. And especially with young men, man. So for me, and I'll talk about this when I come on your show in depth because I really want to get this message across. I both of my parents were teenagers. Dad was 15, mom was 16 when I was born.
Wow.
Drug addicts, criminals in and out of prison. We were homeless. The whole thing. Like everybody's got
Yep.
adversity, right?
Totally.
And I was this broken young man who thought I was sort of doomed to white trash hood, if you will. I had no self confidence. I had no self worth. And for me, when I was 15, getting it, so I left home in seventh grade. My mom was beating the crap out of me. I had never reciprocated. I kicked her off of me and screamed enough. And she called the cops on me. They came, took me out of the house, and then I sort of leapfrogged from different family members' homes, slept on couches, all that stuff to get through high school. But that moment for me was huge because I realized the power I had if I just make a decision to make a change. Right? I said enough and kicked her off me. But then, secondly, when I was 15, I discovered the weight room, and I discovered that I could have control over, like, I could put in hard work and get a result, right?
Mhm.
And it was this feedback loop that I hadn't yet experienced in life, and that set me on the right path, man. I had self-confidence. I obviously got in good shape. I got stronger. I and everything sort of snowballed from there. And so to young men who are sort of experiencing the same thing, I always say, man, you need to challenge yourself. You need to impose some adversity on yourself,
Mm.
experience some, and I'm
Mhm.
not talking about like the external adversity. As you mentioned, there's the internal and the external, but you need to experience that sort of, like I did in the weight room or what have you, like challenge yourself in that regard and take on some responsibility, because that was another big thing as a
Absolutely.
young man that just absolutely changed everything for me, because I truly do. I think men need to be needed. We need to serve. And it just fills a part of us up when we do take on responsibility, whether that's, go mow the old lady down the street's grass for free,
Yep.
go help out, somewhere in the community. Just do that. Stop thinking about
Yes.
what you can get from the world and start thinking about what you can give to the world. And that will ironically result in you getting more from the world in the long run. Not that that's the goal, but for young guys, I think that's where you start.
That's exactly it, man. It's so good, and that's why with our young guys, we got them on these projects and challenges every month. There's
Yeah.
work to be done. There's responsibility to be taken on. Like, this is what your focus is this month. You got these two big things, and that's a lot of work. And by the way, you're not going to be able to finish it within a month. Like, you're going to be able to come back to this over and over and over again, because it's not about finding a path. You're going to forge a path. You're going to
Yes.
forge it. You're going to take some steps forward. That's we talk about fire, aim, ready, man. No, take action first, right?
Hmm.
Men are notorious for not, um, a lot of the guys like, oh, I think just overthink it. No, you're not overthinking. You're underacting.
Yes.
That's the thing for guys, right? Like, we need to act our ways into new ways of thinking, not think our ways into new ways of acting. It doesn't work that way for us. So, it's get
100%.
out, go start forging something. It's the fire, aim, ready, do it. And then you'll go, oh, okay, that was cool. I really like this. And this opened up these other doors. Or, okay, that was cool. Also, that showed me that I actually kind of want to do something that's tangential to this. I'm going to go over here, and now I'm going to take a step, right? And each one of those things, your aim gets a little better at becoming the person that you want to become and giving your gift to the world of whatever that looks like. But it starts with the action, not thinking about the action. It's exactly it. And hey,
Yeah.
by the way, that's called education.
Right. 100%. And again, bringing it back to what we said earlier, that's what your ancestors did. And that's why you exist. Because if you're in the village, if there's a freaking saber-toothed tiger coming up on your encampment or a warring tribe, do you have time to sit there and think about, let me just weigh the pros and cons and
Right.
really get theoretical? No, dude, you got to act, and you'll
Yep.
figure out, okay, next time this worked, that didn't work, I'm definitely not going to take that approach. I got through it, I survived, but here's how I'll do it better next time, right? And
Totally.
that's the name of
That's
the game.
exactly it. And look, this is something else I know to be true, because I will get, we'll have conversations like this, and then I've had people come in and try to go the other side. I've had it go from both directions. So I know this happens. So you have some people that'll listen and go, no, man, you guys are talking about, people surviving in the wilderness. No, man, like from a biblical standpoint. Cool. Let's go from a biblical standpoint then.
Right.
David still had to throw the rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had the rock. He still had to throw the rock. Noah still had to build the ark, right? He still had to build it. He still had to put in the work, right? And then, but what did you see too? You saw from human nature was God himself comes down and goes, hey, I'm going to pull these Israelites out of slavery, man. I'm going to pull them out of Egypt and I'm going to take them out, man. And we're going to take them far away from this whole slavery thing. But if it's not fast enough for the people turn around and they're like, you're too loud, actually. So, hey, God, hey, freedom, hey, sovereignty, hey, you're too loud.
Yep.
I'm going to go over here. There's a leader over here, Moses. I want to kill him. Actually, thanks for taking us out of slavery, but where is that golden cow? Because I want to put it back up because I want to go back into it. Right? I want to go back into it because I actually hate freedom and sovereignty. I actually am more comfortable with a known enslavement than ambiguous freedom.
That sums it up, man. Yeah.
That's it. So you can take it either way you want. The point is, you got to get after it, man. That's the only way you're ever going to be educated. It's the only way you're going to move forward. And it's our moral obligation to do so, especially for our young ones.
100%, brother. And that statement right there, the safe slavery versus the ambiguous freedom, that summarizes so many people's lives today, right? So many people's lives are summarized in exactly that. And freedom, look, it can be terrifying, right?
Of course.
Hey, because now it's all on me. Now I've got responsibility. I've got to survive. I've got to figure it out. But I would just say it's so worth it.
Like, it's so worth it, man. It's so worth it, man. And the irony is, man, the more you seek the absolute security, the less you have.
Yeah. We can end it on that. That's perfect, brother. Matt Beaudreau, where can people go to find you online, find your programs? If they're interested in getting involved, where should they go?
I appreciate it, man. Most active under any platform with just my name, at Matt Beaudreau. You can check us out at Apogee Programs on the social platforms as well. And then ApogeeStrong.com will be the place to go to get all of our stuff. Right now, it just shows the young men, but within the next few days, it should show everything that we have going on, from the men to the women to the schools, and all the above. So just ApogeeStrong.com would be a good spot. And if people are interested, man, ApogeeStrongFoundation.org is our nonprofit. We use that money to scholarship young men right now, and fathers and sons for various programs too. So.
Right on. And I'll put all that stuff down in the description for you guys. Matt, I know you're a busy man. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a business owner. You got a lot going on. I really, really appreciate you taking time to chat with me this morning, brother. And thank you for all you do, man. You're a very important person in the fabric of society and helping all these men.
No, honored by that, man, and honored to be here, and appreciate you. And I'm really excited that we get to do this again next week, but we get to dive into you too, man. So very much honored.
Likewise, brother. All you listening, until next time, I love you. Keep your minds free.